On behalf of the World Affairs Council and the Asia Society, I'm Dan Snyder, your moderator for this evening, and it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's guest. Let me start by saying that it used to be said, quite as almost a cliche, that North Korea was a completely mysterious, impenetrable society, one that was totally isolated from the rest of the world and, in that sense, unknowable. And I'd say in recent years, that has been less the case. We've had more and more interaction, both people visiting North Korea as well as the flow of people out of North Korea, both economic refugees, political defectors, and we've come to get a greater sense of what life is like inside North Korea, although it still remains in many respects, particularly when it comes to the governance of North Korea, an opaque society. But one of the great sources of information for us has been the accounts that have been written by refugees and defectors. And there have been a number of them that have been, I think, very important in giving us a more in-depth and detailed sense of life in North Korea. One of them that I had read previously that it remains a strong impression with me is the aquariums of Pyongyang. And we've seen some other accounts written by Western authors based upon the accounts of North Korean defectors. Now, this account, Under the Same Sky, is written by our guest here tonight, Joseph Kim, who was born in North Korea in 1990. And this account deals, for the most part, with his life and upbringing in North Korea before he fled the country as a teenager, crossing the river into China, and ultimately coming to the United States in 2006, where he completed high school and is currently a college student in New York City. And this memoir, which was subtitled From Starvation in North Korea to Salvation in America, is very focused on the years between the beginning of the Great Famine. In some ways, I would call this, it wasn't a famine in the sense that it was a natural disaster, something happened. It really was a famine that came from the collapse, the crisis of the North Korean system, its inability to continue to provide even basic goods to its population. That came out of the end of the Cold War, the cutoff of subsidies and support from the Soviet Union, which had itself collapsed, and from China, and that in some ways triggered the crisis in North Korea. And so this account takes us from really, I think, it's a gripping, detailed account of the famine and the impact, particularly that it had on the fabric of North Korean society. Because this is a very ordered society, which everybody knew their role, everybody had an assigned place. And what I drew from reading this book was a sense of how that very fabric unraveled. And I think that's in some sense, that's the life that you're telling. So please join me in welcoming Joseph Kim here for a conversation about growing up in North Korea and the difficult journey that he's taken to arrive here today. So let me begin, and I will sort of begin this conversation, and we'll talk for a little while, and then we'll open the floor. I'll take the questions that you give me and relay them to Joseph. So let me begin by asking you to tell our audience how you felt initially, the sort of coming of the unraveling of North Korea in your own family. What went on in the lives of your parents that told you that things were not normal anymore in North Korea?
Well, I mean, I was only I'm about 5 years old. So when the famine struck, so my parents didn't really. Let me clear just the question of when the famine hit.
Yeah.
Yes. So my parents didn't really tell us, because I mean, as a parent, I'm assuming that they didn't want me to be afraid of the coming disasters. And plus, my mom also, I mean, my parents probably didn't know what was going on either. So, only thing that I could see was that from reading my parents' face expression, because for as a kids, I mean, my parents was everything to me. I mean, when they were happy, I was happy, but then all of a sudden, their face was, the expressions got darker and darker, and I think that the confusions and I guess the mysterious that expressions were really difficult for us to like trying to understand what was going on. So my parents, I mean, didn't really tell us why it's happening, other than just worrying about what they're gonna do.
Now, your father was actually a fairly successful person in the construct of North Korean society. He had a good position at an enterprise that I believe was related to the military. He was a member of the Workers' Party.
Right.
He was a, relatively speaking, privileged person. So you had, in your early years, you had sort of a fairly decent life within the realm of North Korean society.
Yes, I mean, my life before the famine, I was not only decent, but I thought that was the perfect world. I mean, I never had to worry about the next meals, and I also often received some special candies or some special snacks from the supermarkets. So, I mean, all I had to do was to go out with my friends from neighborhood and hang out and just running around, and you know which I'm grateful to have those memories, because I think really because of that the happy memories and the knowledge that I was being loved by my parents was really something that helped me to be um, I wouldn't say optimistic, but find the strength to fight or confronting the obstacles I was faced later on.
So when do you think, can you identify a moment when you began to think that the sort of that life you had, that settled life you had, was beginning to fall apart? Is there anything that happened that sort of signaled that to you, even as a child?
The signals was again the facial expressions that from my parents, but also started my favorite snacks started disappearing, which is okay. I mean, it was tolerable, but then we also had to sell a television. My father, kind of lied to me, saying, "Oh, we're just selling this TV to get a newer one." And of course, that was not true. But that was probably the sign of the things got worse. But what the scariest sign was probably when I started learn, or when I learned that people actually can die of starvations, not from long distance, but actually, I mean, people that I've seen from uh, earlier life where I saw them, remember their faces from my neighborhood.
Well, throughout your book, I think one of the things that came through to me is, as time goes on, the central sort of driving goal of your life was simply to find enough to eat.
Yes.
And I think that one thing that surprised me, being fairly familiar with the events that took place, is that the peak of famine is generally believed to be 95, 96, 1997, in that area. But you describe it really as being almost a continuous problem of simply not being able to find enough food. And of course, that happened while your own family life was collapsing. Your father lost his job. They had to change their place of life. Your mother went off to try and earn money in the markets. that emerged out of the sort of collapse of the rationing system in North Korea. So many sort of anchors to your life were beginning to get very shaky. But throughout this whole period, food, the search for food, is sort of the driving purpose.
Yes, so actually that was why it was even more difficult for me to uh, settle down in new land in America because like as you described, I mean, food was so central in my life. I mean, the food was love and peace and everything. I mean, the world, it was the entire world for me. But after I came to the States, I mean, that in a sense, my entire dream was already achieved. So I didn't really know what to expect next. And uh, a lot of people told me that now that I reached freedom, I can do everything with my life. But I definitely did not know what everything meant because everything meant for me was food in back in North Korea. So it was uh, difficult for me to, uh, I guess, find a reason to, um, or find the goal, new goals in the States.
Well, so the most traumatic event, it seems to me, that you describe in this book is the death of your own father from starvation.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could, I know it's difficult, but if you could talk about what was going on at that time in North Korea.
So yes, the Great Famine began around 1995-6, and we had ups and downs, but always we never really had like years without worrying about food. So food was always scarce. So my father used to share his portion of food every meals, telling me that, saying that you're a growing boy and you need to eat more. And I knew that that was the remaining portion of the food was not enough for him. So I think accumulating that lack of food for over the years really was a point where my father um, could not be a father anymore because he became so malnourished that and so yeah, I mean, seeing my father, I always thought that my father is the strongest, and he was the everything for me. So it was really difficult for me to see my father not being a father that I have seen in the past. And what makes me even more crazy think about it is that my father he was always about the principles and the integrity. For example, like if he had borrowed a pen from his friend, tell him that, oh, I will give you this pen tomorrow by 12:30 a.m. or 12:30 noon. He has to make sure that he gives it back on that exact time. So you can see that with that type of personality or attitude, it's just not, he was not meant to survive in a society where the honesty and the integrity was not, um, it just didn't allow for the
Well,
type of
your
people to
father
live.
was a loyal supporter
Yes.
of the North Korean regime.
Right.
He believed in the leadership of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il after him. And he never, from what you wrote as you were growing up, he never said anything to indicate, at least in the beginning, that he had lost faith in any way in the system. But did you feel or ever see towards the end of his life that he no longer, that his belief in what he had done with his life had begun to crumble?
I wish that I was a little bit older where I could carry on conversations on that level, but he, I think my father probably felt that way, but he never really expressed, at least in verbally. But I mean, he was also not a naive man. I mean, he knew what was right and what was wrong. So it was probably the combination of both that are still trying to believe that there's going to be a better day, but also trying to, uh, I guess, keep his loyalty to the government that he once committed to give. And I think what made me really sad was that when my father passed away, I didn't really cry much because it was really hard for me to accepting that he was gone. But when the local party officials came and took away the party certificate, I think that's where I started really become emotional and crying, cried because I thought that my father, he was such a loyal man toward the system, but all they had to say was that, sorry, and just to take away the certificate. And I thought that we were going to be able to keep that certificate, but even certificate was taken away. So I was really uh, saddened and bitter about we couldn't even just keep it.
So, in the early, previous to this time, the North Korean state, which was a command economy, provided everything through the state, including all the basic goods, rations, and so on, were done with a ration card, and through your workplace, you received not only your salary, but everything else. Now, that all started to crumble in the mid-90s. No longer was the state providing. And so people were forced to go out and to begin to provide for themselves. And one of the things I think is very important about your account is that you provide a very detailed description of the degree to which, underneath the sort of surface of a very powerful state that controlled everything, in fact, people were doing all sorts of things. They were buying and selling apartments, which
Right.
they weren't supposed to be doing.
Right.
There was informal marketplaces where people came and brought goods. And your mother was a sort of a would-be entrepreneur,
Yes.
and she went out and tried to make a business, including going into China and coming back with goods. And you yourself started to become a kind of a person of the street, even at a fairly young age, particularly as your parents sort of disappeared. Your father died, your mother disappeared for long periods of time, and you had to fend for yourself. And you also became a kind of an entrepreneur of a sort. Describe for us what life was really like in North Korea when the state you could no longer count on the state to provide for you.
I think it was difficult for many North Korean people because, in a sense, that the government provided everything. They were told to do what the government asked, and as long as they follow the commands, the rations and everything was provided. So North Koreans were never really ready to hustle on the street, and that's where good people and really I guess honest people couldn't make it because in order to survive in the corrupted or the collapsed system, they had to learn how to deceive people and lie to people for their own benefits. So, I mean, for my case, I mean, I didn't really. No one really taught me. I mean, you should do this. But I think because I was desperate enough to survive, I learned how to begging from the streets. I think that I started observing that what kind of people are more generous in terms of giving aid, and I found out to be that grandmas and soldiers. I think soldiers, because they are still so young and has the spirit of like let's make it a better world or whatever that was. They were more generous in terms of giving. So those kind of things that which I never was taught in school. I mean, no subject was uh, of classes that taught me, who I should go to beg for. So I can say, uh, I think that the necessity and the desperation was really what drove me to uh, figuring out or learn how to figure out the uh, live in the system.
And for periods of time, you were homeless.
Yes.
And I've read accounts from colleagues of mine who observed this also, that there were, in those days, many homeless children wandering in the train stations and the streets all over North Korea. And you joined that sort of army of homeless children.
Yes. So as I was not the only homeless boy on the street. When I actually, even before, when I was living with my parents, I've been seeing homeless kids on the street, but I never really thought that I would become one of them. So when I found out myself that I was also one of them, it was really um, difficult, and in a sense that I did not really prepare for the days. And first day, first 2 days, I've been saying more than 1,000 times, saying like, "Can you spare me your leftover soup?" Inside my head until I was able to say that out loud. I think what helped me to give up my pride and be able to ask from strangers was from seeing other homeless kids dying away on the ground, and that really made me scared that if I don't speak up, I would also become one of them. And later on, I learned that there is sort of like groups that always go around with together, because begging would not be a solution. No one's really not because they're bad person. It's just that they don't have enough resources to share. So we had to learn how to steal it. But then the merchants, like for example,
So there were
food
sort of
court.
gangs of kids, a sort of Dickensian sort of picture that you draw of gangs that were organized out of these kids. Some of them went into organized sort of crime and various kinds of things, and there were even corrupt police to whom you paid off
Right,
money
right.
and so on.
Yeah, it's funny how that there is unknown, I guess, developed groups and rules. Even in the market, there is rules that you can't go certain sections if that was taken by other groups. So I think um, yes, like grouping with other people is beneficial, because like while you're trying to steal some food from merchants, one can distract other the merchants, and one member can like sneak out some food. So it's has benefits of being in the group, but also they tend to understand each other more than anyone else, because we all went through the similar path.
I think, there is this image of North Korea, and some of it comes from uh, visitors, foreign visitors who go on these very structured and guided trips, and they particularly generally go to Pyongyang, where a lot more resources are flowing into the capital city. But even when they visit elsewhere, there's an image of a fairly ordered, disciplined society. Some of it may be the product of fear, but some of it also the product of loyalty and support for the regime. But what you convey in your book is that underneath that sort of surface of order, there's quite a bit of chaos.
Right.
There's crime, there's corruption, there's people who are floating around in the system without actually anchors, jobs, places of work. They're moving from place to place. Do you think that that we have a fairly false image of the reality of life in North Korea?
In some sense, yes, because in the West media we tend to focus so much on the nuclear weapons and the political conflicts and how crazy that young leader is. But because of that, we so focus on that heavily, high level politics. We tend to forget the average or the common people of North Koreans. We don't really. It's really hard for Western American peoples to draw an image of average North Koreans, and saying, oh, that is also there are also people like ourselves, like who have hopes and dreams to have a better future. So definitely, I don't think that there is a lot of images that is more humanized inside North Korean society, not by uh, the government level,
Right.
but I guess, more inner society where it's with more average North Koreans.
Now, you grew up in a city along the border with China,
Right.
not very far from the river, from the Tumen River.
Yes.
And in those border areas, there has been, over the years, a lot more engagement with China. A lot of people moving back and forth, going to China to work or to trade, to bring goods and then bring them back, Chinese goods back to Korea to sell them to North Korea. And so there's a lot of awareness of life in China as being better than life
Right.
in North Korea. When you thought about China, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about your mother and your sister after this, but what you were aware of as a child, what was the image that you had of China relative to North Korea?
I think what really made me happy think about the lives in China was that um, there was one friend of mine who went to China and came back, told me how so much access to meats and white rices, and I thought that was the most warming and like like I was thinking about those like food, not necessarily like the new fashions or the clothing or the lights or the TVs. Or none of those were enticing enough for me to continuously thinking about it. So mostly good food.
So China was a place where there was food.
Yes.
That was
Yeah.
the dominant. So your mother, as I said, she tried to make a business out of going back and forth to China, and then and this is very much a continuous theme in your book. At a certain point, she went to China with your younger sister,
Yeah.
and you were very close to your sister,
Yes.
and you didn't know why they were going to China,
Right.
but your sister never came back. And what did you come to understand about what probably had happened?
So I think to give more insight of who my sister was or what she meant for me was that she was just a very extraordinary sister. Even like adults from my neighborhood like tell me you should really grateful to have such a sister like Bongsuk. And at that time I was like, why would you tell me this? Like, don't you have a business to mind or yours? But she was just really well respected from the neighborhood. And one example would be like my father would give us 10 pieces of candies, bring 10 pieces of candies and divide equally, 5 for my sister and 5 for me. And of course I will eat them away like right away. And my sister always eat 1 or 2 and then save the rest for the rainy days when I am like sick or when I'm like upset for some reasons. She was always loving and she was always sacrificing for me. So like I never thought living a life without my sister. So that's why even when my sister was leaving of the country, I didn't even say goodbye properly, or I didn't even give her a hug because the concept of not living with my sister, older sister, was not never in my mind. And what really happened was that my mom realized that she couldn't come back with North Korea with empty hands, and only option that she had at the moment was that to I don't really like this word, but my mom had to uh, sell my older sister to hand my older sister to a broker, Chinese broker, um, believing that she would have a better life and a chance to live a better life in China than returning. And that I also, in retro perspective, it was also a sacrifice that my mom made for me so that at least she could save me. And once she came back and when I had a chance to talk to her, I remember how struggled she was trying to explain to me her reasons, but I was only kids and it was really difficult for me to process her reasons. And I guess now my regret or wish is that I was a little bit. Wish I was old enough to understand her reasons. And the reason why I didn't share this part of story in public before until I wrote this book was that I was really worried that people would judge my mom for what she has done. But I do have to say that this it's not just my mom, but there's so many other North Korean families, mothers who went through similar or even worse uh, situations or the life, and so it was just difficult for me to imagine uh, thinking my sister was being sold in China. I mean, I think I was just not being able to process what was it like for her to be in China.
Eventually, your mother was imprisoned
Yes.
and sent to labor camp.
Yes.
And you don't actually ever say in your book, maybe you don't know what happened to her after that. You ended up going into China,
Yes.
crossing the river yourself, and sought the help of Christian churches and missionaries there. And you went to look for your sister,
Yes.
but you never found her.
Right.
Is that something you're still trying to do, to find both your sister and to get in touch with your mother?
Definitely. I mean, I hope that through this book I will be able to find my sister. About my mom, it's difficult to keeping or having a hope to see her again, knowing that what kind of system or the prisons the North Koreans have. But I think that's why I also my mom comes in my dreams. It's funny enough that I don't see my father or my sister in my nightmares, but I do see my mom very often. I think it's because I still live or carry on having the guilt of kind of giving up to see her, or my.
Well, one of the audience asked a question, which I think you're sort of partially answering, which is to what inspired you to write this book? What were you hoping to achieve by writing this book?
I think I believe that people are good people, and I think that many people had not been able to help on this issue because they didn't know much about the informations, and I was hoping providing my life experience from North Korea. I was hoping that with the story I will be able to inform more and more people. But also I think it's a great example of how average college students or Americans can actually change the lives of some North Korean people. I mean, my life has been completely changed, and I hope that it shows the possibility and the hopes for people to be able to more engaged and inspired to participate in the process of rescuing more North Korean defectors in China.
So most defectors and refugees end up in South Korea.
Yes.
And as I understand from you, you've never actually been to South Korea. What do you now know, and what did you understand before you left North Korea about the differences between life in North Korea and life in the South?
I mean, in North Korea, I thought that South Korea is poorer than the North Korea because I remember going to school, elementary school, where we read anecdotes or stories of how South Korean teenager boys has to clean the American soldiers' shoes to survive on. So I was thinking about that in North Korea, but then once I left the country, I mean, pretty much everything that I was taught was false, and I mean, the evidence was prevalent. I mean, all over the place. So I think that was also really difficult for me because I was like, this is a lot of things that I believed and thought was turning into false, and so it was.
When did that first really hit you? When you went to China or before you left?
When I went to China,
Yeah.
I think the biggest reality was that there was so much light, and also the common or the popular trend at the time was I remember seeing a commercial from TV where they advertise medicine that helps you lose weight, and that was really interesting. I was like, why the heck would you buy a medicine to lose your weight? And I mean, it's one example, but so many other examples.
Now, someone asks, and I think an important question, which is, have you had contact with other defectors and refugees, and have you sort of exchanged stories and compared notes and thought about, as amongst yourselves, what you think the future of North Korea ought to be?
Mm. Yes, I do keep in touch with North Korean defectors, either they who settled in South Korea or in the U.S., and we try to stay in touch and talk about this the issue. I think we don't really expect we don't really look for big things. I mean, I think the down to conclusion always is that I want to see that there is North Korea when kids can actually go to school instead of being live on the street, learning how to stealing or learning how to beg, and we just hope that there is a day where we can see or we can go back to North Korea with lots of food and being able to feed other people. And
So according to people I know who have done relief work in North Korea and who go in and out of there regularly, and also according to the World Food Program, and in some ways according to the regime itself, the food situation in North Korea has improved quite a bit in the last few years. Supposedly there's not large shortage of grains. It's not considered to be anything close to the sort of malnutrition and famine conditions that we saw earlier. Are you hearing that as well from people who've left more recently, or do you still have the impression that maybe when you get away from the sort of most visible places like in the capital city, conditions are still quite bad?
so yes, that's actually really a good point, and it's actually has been the biggest progression or changes. Um, I don't. The facts is that I know that the North Korean defectors who lives in South Korea or in the U.S. they send money back to North Korea, and the experts estimate about 10 to 15 million US dollars going inside North Korea. So I can see that can be very helpful. And in terms of like the food situation, it is also true that it has been more accessible. No, but I don't know whether it's because people become used in the system and it seems like they're more stable now, or is it because of more food supplies in there? So that I don't know. But and also um, other after Kim Jong Un or Kim become in power, he like made sure that he raised security level in the border areas. So without bribing the security guard and goes to leave North Korea is much difficult than my time where there was at least no like barbed wires in the border. So it is almost impossible for to have a North Korean homeless boy who escaped the country because he would not have enough money to bribe. But the recent
Of course, just the other day, a teenage North Korean soldier defected across the DMZ, which is quite unusual, into South Korea. And he described conditions in the army, which actually are somewhat similar to things that you were describing, of being beaten and of food shortages.
right. But again, I mean, I only get to hear part of the stories from the defectors, so I can't say how much progression has made inside North Korea.
So let me raise a difficult question, and that's this issue of sort of the reliability of defector stories. And this came up in the case of Shin Dong-hyuk, who was the main source, the story for the book that Blaine Harden, a former Washington Post reporter, wrote about conditions in the prison camps in North Korea. And later on, it turned out that he had, part of the story he told was not accurate. And that's always an issue that comes up sometimes with defectors. And I experienced it myself as a journalist, that always the question is, the story they tell is sort of their passport to, particularly in South Korea.
Right.
So there's always this issue of, are they telling an accurate story, or are they just telling something that they think people want to hear? How do you respond to those kinds of issues that people raise about the reliability of accounts? And I'm not talking about yours in particular, but in general.
That question is harder than my final paper from my school. So I think we see two issues within that incident, right? One being, regardless whether he signed to be the leader of North Korean defectors community or not, he was put in a situation where he advocated a lot of human rights issues for
Right.
the North Korean people. So therefore, the one issue of being whether as a leader, was he create a reliable leader, right? That was one. And the second
I mean,
part,
a leader outside of North Korea, of
right,
people who
right.
are trying to change the society,
Thank you for that
Yeah.
corrections. I would,
not within North Korea.
right, right. And another issue is the biggest one is the matter about the credibility. In a sense, it's more of like asking his integrity, right? I definitely do see potential harms of his changed narratives as a being North Korean from a North Korean community, defector
Right.
community as a leader, because at the end of the day, it's not really tainting his credibility, but the credibility of the entire community, right? And so that's hardest part. But one thing I have to say is that he never really learned what leadership is or what leaders should be. I mean, I learned what leadership or what leaders should be throughout our educations by going to high school and going to colleges. I mean, in American society, we teach us how to be a leader, versus he never really knew those kind of consequences. So that's my perspective of his, I guess, reliability of being an advocate. And the other part of his personal integrity, um, I don't think anyone can say anything about it, because at the end of the day, I mean, this includes for every one of us, every single one of us. I mean, either like you wake up in the morning, either you wanted to have a black suit or blue jacket. It's really up to your choice. No one really should say, oh, you should wear this certain type of colors or clothing. So I totally, I can say that yes, it was not probably the most wise thing to um, changing or fabricate, no, um, what's good word, changing some narrative was probably not the most wise things. But again, I mean, I truly believe that he did it for the cause of for the issue. And I mean, no one here in this room, including North Korean defectors, can say the amount of attention that he brought in the world by sharing his stories. No one can really say you did right or wrong things.
Right.
I guess to some, I mean, I guess it's matter of like question. Does the and what's the does the end
Justify the
justify
means.
means? I mean, those are kind of answers. I mean, questions that even philosophers has not been able to answer it. So who am I to saying whether he did right thing or wrong thing to me? But all I can say is that I hope that from this instance, as a community, we learn from it, the mistake, and progress toward for the better and good cause.
So last year, the UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights issued a rather incredible report, a long 400-page report on human rights violations inside North Korea. And that report basically recommended that that first of all, it said that crimes against humanity were being committed and had been committed in North Korea. And it recommended that the leadership of North Korea should be held responsible under international law for crimes against humanity. And that was a somewhat controversial report. Even in South Korea, it was a controversial report. I don't know whether you've read the report, but what do you think of that idea that, because you are the person who personally experienced exactly the situations that are described in that report, do you feel that you were a victim of crimes against humanity?
I mean, yes, definitely. I mean, think about the lives. I mean, over a million people died of starvation when it could be prevented. I mean, I recently learned that when the Great Famine was happening, Kim Jong Il spent multi-billion dollars to build his father's monument for his. I mean, with that money, I mean, he could save so many lives. I mean, my father perhaps didn't have to die of the starvation. I mean, to me, that is certainly a crime against humanity. And I think in UN, they talk a lot about the word accountability. Accountability, yes. I think I see accountability as a mechanism to preserve and promoting the greatness of humanity, and also to prevent the downfall of the human history. I mean, if we don't held, if we don't hold accountable for what Kim Jong Un or his parents did, I mean, what kind of messages does that insinuate to other countries that might also committing a crime against their own people? So, I do think it is very important for the international communities and the leaders to hold this him as hold his the accountable for what he has been
So
done.
how do you respond, and this is reflected in many of the questions that are asked, to those people who say, well, it's not a good idea to raise these kind of human rights questions. We should focus instead on prospects for reconciliation with North Korea, particularly reconciliation between South and North Korea. How do you respond to that?
I will let them work through. I mean, because we've been trying. I mean, we try to engage in communications. We try to have, peace treaties, but that didn't really work. So I don't really understand where their argument still comes from, and how do they want to defend their argument. So, I mean, by any means, I mean, I hope they try on their own, and if that works, I mean, great, but I don't see that's gonna happen. So I hope that they know what they're talking about, because if it's just I just hope that they to think twice before they actually create this sensational or the conversations.
So if I were to ask you, what do you think 5 years from now or 10 years from now, what North Korea will be like? What would be your prediction?
Really bad at predictions. I mean, I always, whenever I guess
You're not the only one who's bad about predictions about North Korea.
um, I think what I see the changes from inside North Korea is that more and more young generations become less and less loyal toward the regime,
Right.
and I think that is huge. I mean, North Korean government or the regime would not be able to sustain their power, absolute power, without the consensus of. No, that's wrong word. They can't ignore the mass, the population and the majority opinions when it becomes like the entire country becomes so against of their own people. So North Korea is actually, I think if I was in their shoes, I will come up with some ways to mitigate that.
I mean, if you're talking about the leadership of the regime.
Right, right.
So always the problem that people pose is that if they open up, in order to make the kind of changes they would have to make in order to meet the demands of the population for a normal life, they'd have to open up the society much more. And the more they open up, the more people learn the truth. I was a correspondent in Moscow at the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, so I saw that dilemma working itself out in that context. Isn't that, do you see that kind of problem in North Korea today?
Definitely, because I think one example is that that North Korean government started tolerance or allows people to have that black market system, which is really tricky because it is clear that the North Korean government as a regime, as leaders, they lost that charismatic and traditional authorities, what once Max Weber described. But I think it's tricky because it can be interpreted that they have that rational authority or rationality as being a government, because what if some North Koreans will come and say, oh, look, like the government is actually allowing us to do this black market activities. Isn't it also kind of being rational? So I hope that North Koreans are not being deceptive of what has been allowed in the system. But it is also true that, as you described, more and more people learn about outside of the world through that the black market activities. It is also, almost inevitable for North Korean government they either have to compromise with the people, or they either have to forcefully shut down the market, but they also know that it's not a smart idea, so I don't know what the government will do about it.
Right, that's their dilemma. So let me close with a question that people asked, many different versions of this, but basically it comes to this about your life here in the United States. What sort of what was sort of the most difficult in some ways, but the experience that you had in making the transition from life in North Korea, being a refugee in China, and ending up in the United States?
Sure, definitely, the language and adapting new cultures, that's pretty much what all immigrants' children goes through once they come to the States. But what really was the difficult part for me was, as I mentioned earlier, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life after that the food was provided, and trying to learn who I was, and trying to identify my dreams and my futures was the really difficult part, because I didn't really think about this in the daily basis before. And also, I think morally what really makes me difficult is that now, my body has become adapted and used to throw away some leftover like French fries or some food. It become, in a sense, kind of normalcy or norm.
Right.
But knowing that by cognitively, I know that it's not right thing to do, because I know that even till this day, even today, there is still so many North Korean homeless and people whose dream is to actually be able to eat be a full meal. So I think the combination of that, me getting used to throw away, okay to be wasteful with food, but also knowing that it's not right thing to do. So I think that part is something that I have to work on, probably.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have tonight, and there were many, many wonderful questions, and I apologize if I couldn't convey them all. On behalf of the World Affairs Council and the Asia Society, I want to ask you to join me in thanking Joseph Kim for sharing his story with us tonight. And many thanks, of course, to you, the audience, for your questions. And I would urge you, as a reminder, to take the opportunity to buy Joseph's book, Under the Same Sky, which is on sale here tonight, courtesy of Books Inc., and he'll be available to sign copies on stage. And thank you again, and good night, everybody.
Thanks so much.